Hey, Stefan.
Hello.
Hi. I had a question about relationships.
All right.
I guess I'm just experiencing some real fog and confusion in a particular area, and I'm just wondering if maybe you might be able to point out where I could maybe investigate further. But I'm in a place right now where I'm encountering a lot of difficulty in finding a good reason to get into a romantic relationship.
Do you mean get into a particular romantic relationship or just a romantic relationship in general?
Just in general.
Right. Okay.
And this would be aside from, like, right now, I'm not sure if I want to have kids, but I do know if I did want to, then it's like, okay, well, I know how important it would be to have a rich and very strong connection with someone, and that's something I want to pursue. But I guess right now I guess there's part of me that feels I should be looking for that, but I can't find a good reason as to why.
Why to be in a romantic relationship?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. What were your reasons before?
I think my reasons before were because I wanted my needs met.
Do you mean, like, okay, what kind of needs? Because, when you're talking romance, we're talking about naughty bits as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, definitely I was interested in sex, and I was interested in feeling like I was of value. Like
to be sexually desired is a pleasurable experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just with you and a mink hand puppet. Wait, sorry, let's not talk about my stuff. We'll get back into that later. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what else is coming up. I mean, those were definitely important factors for me. Just feeling attractive, feeling someone wants to be with me. Someone is, that sense of being cared for. And I guess I feel like I'm doing a lot of that myself now.
Right.
For myself. And in terms of, I guess all I wanted to say is in terms of like intimacy and being able to be vulnerable, I feel like I've really developed some relationships lately that allow me to do so.
And double entendre completely meant, what need does romance serve when we don't need to fill a hole?
Okay.
Should we just pause and enjoy that double entendre for the moment before we move on? Should we just, okay. Right. No, but it's a real question, right? When I don't have dysfunctional needs that need to be met in a romantic relationship, then what is, what is it for? Right. No, and look, I mean, I think that people go through this when they have fundamental changes, so you're not alone in this at all. Right. So for instance, right, so let's say somebody's a pretty heavy drinker, right? And so their social life and their friends and so on kind of revolve around drinking, right? What the hell happened to my voice there? Drinking. and so when they stop drinking, then they sort of say, okay, well, wait a sec. What is a friendship, right? Like, if it's not hanging out and getting drunk, if it's not going to bars, then what is a friendship, right? And that's a very, very important question to have, right? Whenever you make fundamental changes in your value systems, your relationships are called into question. That's why people don't really like to make fundamental changes in their values, right? Because it steps you off the conveyor belt onto what? Some opposite conveyor belt, some deep space, some endless falling, some rocket-propelled thing. We don't know, right? But it takes you off, right? And there was somebody who posted on the board about problems they were having with a relativist, right? But if you abandon relativism for the self-contradictory foolishness that it is, it's not your relationship to virtue that fundamentally changes. I mean, I kind of think it is, but what shows up much more immediately is the change in your relationship with others, right? So you had a template called romance is good for X, Y, and Z, right? Good for sex, good for self-esteem, good for feeling valuable, good for feeling cared for, and so on, right? And now that you've been working with yourself, sorry, lots of double entendres. Now that you've been self-stimulating, now that you've been, I'm trying to thump in the bishop, I don't know. But now that you've been working with yourself for a while, you don't need that kind of affirmation or reinforcement from others. I mean, it's not like you don't need it at all, but you really don't need it as much, right?
Yeah.
And so now the question is, I don't think the question is, let me just be annoying and sweep aside your question. I don't think the question fundamentally is, what is the point of romance? I think the question is more fundamentally, who do I want now that I don't need?
Right.
Does that sort of make sense?
It does. And, no, that does. You're right. That's a great question. And I think I feel like a serious pang of some real despair, I guess, when you ask that question, because I realize I'm really looking for a diamond in the rough here in a very extreme way.
But is that despair even yours? Maybe it is. No, maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. Because I'll tell you, oh man, I will tell you, when you raise your standards, my friend, you would not believe the pain it causes people around you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, just to take that typical example, which I think we can all identify with to some degree. When you say, when I was in my, I was like 16 or so, I went through a phase of heavy drinking, which lasted about 3 weekends. And drinking to the point of vomiting and drinking to the point of whatever, right? And I got tired of it. I didn't like the hangover, and the fun of drinking it didn't match the, just sitting around feeling half dead for most of my Sundays or whatever, right? And so I stopped doing it. And unfortunately, the friends that I had in that phase continued to do it. And it was difficult for them that I didn't want to do it, right? And this could work any number of ways, right? So there were some friends that I had, like when I was sort of 14 or 15, we played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons because we were just in such high demand in the sexual arena that we needed to retreat from that. And anyway, let's not go on with that story. But so 14 or 15, I played Dungeons and Dragons, and then 16 or 17, I didn't. And there were friends who didn't make that transition and continued into their 20s and 30s playing Dungeons and Dragons. And it was painful for them that I didn't want to anymore. So I think when you say, well, when I'm raising my standards, I feel despair, it may be that it's yours. It may also be that it's the internalized people around you who feel despair that you're raising your standards. Because it leaves them behind, because it excludes them from your future, unless they grow, which, if they're feeling a lot of despair, they may not, right?
Right. No, that's interesting. I don't know if this thought has any validity, but it just kind of sprang up. But I think part of me feels like it's so difficult to find someone who would value the same type of introspection and nonviolence, and they'd have the same values. Like, part of me feels like it's actually so difficult that it's almost accepted that it's impossible. So in that case, if that part of me actually accepts it, then it is going to make it difficult because I actually don't believe that person exists. But
well, that person exists in you, right?
Yeah, it does.
Would you say that person exists in me?
Yeah.
Would you say that there may be a few dozen, at least, people scattered around the world who listen to this show who hold those values as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably tens of thousands by now, maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
The impossibility. Yeah. I'm trying to think whether I should recycle this anecdote or not. I really wish. I feel like I feel like an old married couple with my listeners is now. I don't do stories. Everything I think is new is like, no, you already said that in podcast.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Look, the impossibility is not rational because not only are you doing it, but you know of many, many other people who are doing it too. So the impossibility is not rational. And so I would argue that the impossibility doesn't come from you. That the despair and the impossibility come from those around you. People avoid growth by saying that growth is impossible, or growth is a lie, or growth is pretense, or by attacking the person who's growing as arrogant, as, oh, he's suddenly too good for us, or whatever, right? And so what they want to say is that growth is impossible. And there certainly are times where growth damn well does feel impossible. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
And the reason why people people who aren't going to grow tend to dissociate from people who are growing is they don't want to see that it is possible, because that raises anxiety within them.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, and I already feel like you've given me a very useful angle that I was not thinking about at all.
Yeah, always look for the empiricism of the emotions, and if the empiricism isn't there, first place to look is the emotions of those around you.
Mm-hmm.
In your head, people you may never meet again. People you may never meet again in your life will be in your head until the end of time. Well, at the end of your time anyway, right?
Occupying space and
I still have cynical thoughts about my marriage from time to time. It's pretty occasional now. From women I haven't seen in 10 years or 15 years. Because I know what they would say. Or about Freedomain Radio.
Right.
I know what people would say if I were to re-engage with them in my life, because they're already saying it in my head. And I know that they haven't changed because they haven't contacted me to say good job or whatever, right?
Yeah. 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 You're absolutely right. I really connect with that. Yeah.
Somebody's asked what's wrong with Dungeons & Dragons. Let's get on to the really important topic. There is nothing wrong with Dungeons & Dragons. I think Dungeons & Dragons, I found it to be an enormous blast. It was so much fun. It was incredibly vivid for the imagination.
Hey, sorry about that. Sounds like Steph's, he's still connected, but it sounds like the audio cut off. So, Steph, if you can hear us.
Sorry about that. Is that better?
Oh, yep.
Sorry, wandered out, right? Yeah, so it became an exercise in statistics and so on, and then there were other guys who, there's something fundamentally funny, at least to me, about Dungeons and Dragons, which is not mockery, but it's just generally funny. And there was another guy who, like, every time it would veer into comedy, would say, like, guys, let's get serious. Let's get serious about this. Stop fooling around. It's like, you realize we're sitting in a dark basement eating greasy pizza and drinking RC Cola and talking about fighting gas bags with one eyes in our imaginations, and now you're saying let's get serious. I don't quite follow that way of thinking. But I think that Dungeons & Dragons ideally should be a preparation. It should be rehearsal for a courageous life, in the same way that comic books should be a rehearsal for a courageous life. So I don't know, gosh, it's been a while ago, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I watched the original Superman with Christopher Reeves. And I found it quite moving that this, because I was really into that film when it first came out in the late 70s. I bought the baseball cards and the gum, and I had like posters, and I drew him and all that kind of stuff. I was really into that film. And I hope that I imbibed at least some of that idea of courage and integrity and so on, just as I did with Ayn Rand's novels and so on. Excuse me. Oh, only one sneeze. Don't you hate that? Anyway. So I think that Dungeons & Dragons is fine, but you don't want to get stuck in rehearsal in life. Right? You don't want to get stuck in rehearsal. You don't want to get stuck on practice without actually playing the game. You don't want to get stuck rehearsing the play and never actually go out and audition. And so I think that the purpose of it is to give you courage and imagination and other sorts of skills in your life. And so I think that if you stay in Dungeons & Dragons, just as if you stay in comic books, you are staying in a rehearsal space rather than getting out and bringing those values to life in the world. So that would be my argument about that. It's not a particularly foundational moral argument, but that would be my approach. People have said the FDR dating site. Well, see, that is to say that the dating site called FDR should be set up by somebody else. But why should that be? You know, if you see somebody who's attractive on the board, you can always send them an email and say, "Hey, how's it hanging?" And they can reply back short, shriveled, and always slightly to the left.